with the last two episodes of Let the Right One In, you'll find yourself feeding for the final episode, and we're probably going to be left with the kind of season one finale that is definitely going to make you clamor for season two and wanting to look on Deadline and all these other places to know not only if it's going to be renewed, but also when it's the release date for season two's premiere. So to start off, let's go with what's happening in Claire's household. As seen in episode 7, and going into episode 8, she now has a new test subject in a gentleman named Chris. And she tasks Peter to transform Chris into a vampire, which wasn't the best idea. Mainly because with Chris being made by Peter, he now feels like he's his maker, and like how we've seen in other vampire productions, now he has this sort of weird father figure thing going, and it makes it so all of Claire's experiments, they're making him feel something that isn't really helpful for her because she's not a brain surgeon. She more so is into chemistry and all that, so her poking and prodding into Chris's brain is not making him into a better person. If anything, she's slowly but surely killing him. Which becomes a problem when Chris tries to escape and Peter decides to side with Chris because, reverse that. Peter tried to help Chris escape, and in the process, Chris betrayed not only Peter, but he also tried to kill Claire. And that's why Matthew's not around to try to protect him. That's because Naomi came to the house, with Ben of course, and with her making it seem that the police are now going to start focusing on what's happening in that household, Matthew decides he needs to get his affairs together and perhaps try to find something on Naomi to get her off the case. But getting back to the whole Peter, Chris, and Claire situation, luckily for Claire, before Chris can kill her, Peter kills his thing. And even though Claire's ready to tap out and go back to her old life in the West, she decides to give Peter one more chance, and after that, she's done. So for our second topic, we gotta go into what happened with that date. So when it comes to the date, Eleanor and Isaiah are excited about it. As for how Naomi feels, she feels a little put off at first because Mark takes her to a burger joint. But being that the burgers are so good, it helps lessen the whole expectations of the night. So instead of it being some high-class place when she has to be kind of like, uptight because of everybody's around, dressed up to the nines or whatever, it seems Mark really took a good place for not only the food but also for the vibe. Now, as for the vibe between them, it's very awkward. Lest we forget, Mark hasn't been with somebody in 10 years, possibly more than just dating them, but maybe also in a sexual manner, which probably doesn't really matter for this, but I think it's worth noting. And then with Naomi, it's not clear when officially she and Frank broke it off, much less if she just fully dedicated herself to raising Isaiah, and also when it comes to her job just committing to that, but either way, things are awkward. Bible verses are mentioned, but eventually the ice breaks, and while they don't have a real romantic, kind of dinner, at the very least it's one that shows there is some type of compatibility there. And with that, Eleanor's quite excited because she's really starting to build a separate relationship with Naomi that doesn't include Isaiah or Mark. And with that, she's starting to learn how to defend herself thanks to a self-defense class that Naomi teaches. And while she has no potential to replace her mother, at the same time, at least Naomi could be some kind of maternal figure when it comes to Eleanor's life, because as we've seen thus far, the only type of figure she has in her life is her father, Mark, and then Uncle Zeke, who just came back into her life, so it's basically all men. And since both men infantilize? Since both men treat her like a child and expect her to be like a child, she doesn't get to be the 22-year-old that she is and learn how to defend herself, feed herself, or anything like that. But thanks to something that happens in episode 9, she is pushed to actually get into that type of life because it's shown that Mark is no longer able to be a Superman and handle everything, but he's going to need help in order to keep Eleanor alive, or even, may at some point, have to let go of the reins and let her take care of herself. Which leads into the third topic, which is Because of Naomi showing up to Claire's door, Matthew shows up at Naomi's door, and when he does that, he ends up encountering Isaiah. Naturally, Isaiah's not trying to let some strange man into his apartment to sneak around because he doesn't know who he is. And while Matthew says he was sent by the soup or whatever, Isaiah tries to make clear, my mom's a cop. Just stop while you're ahead. But that's not enough for Matthew. So when Isaiah and Mark talk, because Mark shows up, that seems to perhaps calm things down when it comes to Matthew. But while those two are looking, he sneaks in, and granted, Mark goes in with Isaiah to look around and try to see if anybody's there, but there isn't since Matthew's well hidden. But who's to say that when Isaiah went to his room or something, Matthew didn't do what he needed to do and then get out? It's hard to say. What is very much clear, though, is that when Eleanor checks in with Mark about how the date went, his focus is more so on the stuff he found out about than it is actually the date itself. Like, for example, Naomi talks about Claire when she's on her dinner, lunch? While she was on her date with Mark, and with that, he starts putting things together in terms of Claire being someone he needs to talk to, maybe that Peter is somebody who, based on the timetable, may have also been turned into a vampire. And with all this information, Eleanor's like, okay, you might have found a cure and everything, but what about the date with Naomi? Did you enjoy yourself? Did she enjoy herself? And Mark makes it very clear, she is an ends to a means for information. She is not someone that he necessarily likes in that kind of way, that he could potentially love in that kind of way. And being that Eleanor is starting to build hope and expectations, this hurts her feelings, so she starts having back and forth with Mark that leads to him saying some very hurtful things, which include talking about Elizabeth giving up her life and how Naomi can never be her mother. And all of this makes it so that when Mark goes off to talk to Claire and try to get some information there, Eleanor is upset to the point where when Isaiah comes over to try to check in and see how the date went, the first thing that Eleanor does is just melt into that boy's arms because she's just been emotionally through it. With us combining two episodes into one, we're going into a fourth topic. So the fourth topic deals with everything that happens from the end of episode 8 regarding Mark, Matthew, and Claire, and going into episode 9. So to make a long story short, while Mark is on his way to go see Claire, Matthew intercepts, he kidnaps Mark, and he starts interrogating him. Now, the interrogation doesn't reveal much because Mark seems to be able to handle pain more than he should be able to, considering from what we know he doesn't have military training, but because it's for Ellie, he knows how to keep his mouth shut. But because Matthew actually has military training, he knows how to extract the kind of information he needs to know that somebody should be in Mark's apartment and they can be used as leverage. So with that, someone is sent over to Mark's apartment where Eleanor and Isaiah are still together, him consoling her, talking to her so that she can calm down a bit. And they hear one of Matthew's people come in and even talk about, Mark being kidnapped and all that. And thanks to Isaiah's phone going off, Eleanor gets spotted and she starts using some of the power that Naomi told her to use, or that through that self-defense class that she realized she had. And with that, she takes Matthew's person hostage while Isaiah stays behind. This leads to the man, strangely, taking Eleanor to where Mark's being held. And once they get there, Eleanor pretty much goes off. She kills at least 2, maybe 4, maybe even 5 people, including ripping one person's head off. And while this is all happening, Matthew left Mark behind for once he realized Mark knew about Peter, knew about Claire, and then he mentions Eleanor and the whole vampire thing. He realizes that this is somebody who Claire probably should actually meet. And while he's going to pick up Claire, that's when Eleanor does her thing. Now, when Matthew gets back to the facility with Claire in the passenger seat, He sees that the gate is open, so with that, he has Claire stay in the car. He goes in first, and with seeing Eleanor and seeing what was done, he immediately knows I need to put in some light to this place to protect myself because Eleanor will be burned by the light. But what Matthew didn't factor into this fight with Eleanor is that Mark is now free and there's a bunch of guns just laying out on the floor. So while Matthew is able to get Eleanor on the ground and stop burning her with the sunlight, Mark has a gun, kills Matthew, and with that, he wraps up Eleanor so they can get back home. This leads to Claire taking note of all this, and it seems she's less so factoring in, the person who handles all my money, who handles the drugs is now dead, and she's more so focused on there's somebody else here raising a vampire and maybe how she can collaborate with them. But one of the problems that she's going to face is that with this whole Matthew situation going down, Mark is ready to leave. And when Naomi calls, because she's now part of this Interpol case, because this woman named Darby appears to have information that could perhaps lead her straight to Mark being a serial killer. Yeah. So, Mark doesn't know about that yet, since they haven't had that conversation. But it's very much clear that Mark is running out of time, and when Naomi calls so that she can really focus on this Interpol case, and have someone watch Isaiah for the night, Mark says he's off to Mexico with Eleanor, doesn't know when or if he'll ever come back. Actually, he says he won't come back. And this is kind of like, it puts Naomi in this weird place of questioning why and everything, but with the way that Mark has been in the past, she knows that asking questions is not going to probably lead her to any answer, so for now she just lets it go. But before Mark and Eleanor can make their exit, Claire shows up at the door, and I would be remiss not to say, also something that happens before Mark and Eleanor can make their exit is Isaiah and Eleanor meet outside at the tree where they met the first time and exchange that they love each other. And also, of course, with Isaiah hearing that Eleanor's gonna leave, he tries to barter with her and she says to forget her and yada yada yada. But what matters the most right now is that with Claire showing up to Mark's door, this means a whole lot of things could happen next, and that may keep Mark from leaving as planned. So the first highlight for us is just wondering what's happening next for Claire. Matthew was such an integral part of her handling this whole Peter situation in terms of finding people for him to feed on, finding people for her to test on, then this whole drug trade thing to make her money so that she can run the labs. So now with him gone comes the question of what's going to happen next. I'm assuming Matthew still has more people part of his organization that can do the work, but are they going to quickly recognize Claire's authority, or are they going to perhaps try to take over and just treat her like the scientist who made the drug and not much more? On top of that, with her getting Matthew involved, with her getting Mark involved, what's he going to do? Is he going to be expected to become the new Matthew and handle operations? Is he going to be expected to maybe help feed Peter and handle that situation? What's next for him in all this? Because right now, he's in this weird predicament of he just killed a major soldier, and based off of the torture that he experienced, it's very unlikely that between the two soldiers that he killed that anybody at Matthew's organization is going to be willing to work with or under him. So right now, Claire's really moved up when it comes to this show. Mark is in this weird position that, lest we forget, he just told Naomi that he's going to suddenly move. So now she's going to be asking all kinds of questions if he doesn't all of a sudden. So there's a lot going on there that's going to be very interesting to see when it comes to the final episode. And for the second highlight, and again, this is me combining highlights from episode 8 and also episode 9, hence why there will only be 2. The next highlight for me is just how much Naomi has empowered Eleanor. Because as noted, Eleanor, from what we've seen thus far, hasn't had any female influences, and the first one she gets is someone like Naomi. Someone who is strong, who is good at her job, does have a feminine side to her that isn't always seen but exists. So she's is almost like the perfect mix of everything that Eleanor needs in order to be someone who survives without her father. She teaches her how to fight and shows her that she's powerful. Eleanor is able to really embrace that through what she does to the people who captured Marco and tried to capture her. And now it seems that even though things are still going to be very weird with the fact that Isaiah's 13 and Eleanor's 22 and they say they love each other and who knows how far that may be taken, at the very least, she's now at the point where even if mentally she may feel 12 and emotionally she may feel like she's on Isaiah's level, maybe she'll finally start embracing physically that she far surpasses what not only Isaiah can do, but also Mark and maybe even Naomi. And who knows? Maybe like Claudia interviewed the vampire, she may start dressing her age instead of sticking to all these tween clothes and everything, but it's really hard to say when it comes to growth what Eleanor may be going through, but at the very least it's still something that has your wheels turning in terms of what could come next, rather than you just looking at things like we're just doing the same thing in a different episode. Now, overall, with Matthew dead, Naomi's investigation pointed her towards Mark and Claire, and now Eleanor getting to not only know of her strength, but embracing it, and not being ashamed of it because of what she's capable of, it really makes you wonder what are they going to do for the finale, never mind how are they going to set up the second season, assuming it's coming.